All day, my nerves buzzed like frayed electric wires. The morning had passed in an unsettling blur, my wife, Emilia, claiming she had errands to run, while I stayed home battling a sense of unease I couldn't shake. I tried burying my worries in chores, sorting mail, wiping down dusty shelves, anything to keep my mind off the tension simmering in my gut. Then the phone rang, shrill as an alarm bell. At first, I barely registered the caller's words. But when the phrase "candlelit dinner for two" cut through the static, a slow, numbing dread took hold. Emilia never mentioned dinner plans. Why was a fancy restaurant phoning to confirm a reservation she'd made? My heart hammered, telling me something was about to upend our entire world. That phone call jolted me like an unexpected slap. After I hung up, muttering a shaky thank you, I slumped onto the edge of our living room sofa, the cushion sagging beneath me. My fingers trembled as I set the cordless receiver down. A candlelit dinner reservation for tonight, in Emilia's name. 2 seats, 7 o'clock. The restaurant, La Reverie, was known for its romantic ambience and high prices, the kind of place you'd choose for a marriage proposal or an anniversary, not a casual weeknight meal. So if she had planned something nice for us, wouldn't she have at least hinted? My thoughts spiraled. Maybe it was supposed to be a surprise for me. But that logic evaporated once I recalled her parting words that morning: "I'll be out running errands, might swing by the bookstore, then I'll see you later." She'd offered no playful winks or sly suggestions. Nothing that hinted at a romantic evening. And now, this phone call, this restaurant confirmation, had me reeling with suspicion and confusion. I glanced around the living room. Photo frames stared back from the mantel, Emilia and me at the beach last summer, her bright smile beaming. Another from our wedding day, the two of us glowing with newlywed joy. 4 years, I'd treasured those memories, certain that our bond was unbreakable. But at that moment, they felt like silent witnesses to something I couldn't quite name, some creeping betrayal I dared not confront. My stomach twisted at the thought: was she dining with someone else? The question gnawed at me. I felt the first pangs of guilt for even suspecting her, but the phone call was stark evidence that something was amiss. Maybe she'd planned a surprise celebration for us, some milestone or gesture of love I'd forgotten about. If so, the restaurant staff had just ruined the secret. Yet if that were true, why keep me entirely in the dark? The more I considered it, the less sense it made. I checked the time. Nearly midday. My chest felt tight, as though my body was bracing for a confrontation. Emilia's usual errands never took this long, especially on a random Tuesday. Swallowing the lump in my throat, I decided I had no choice but to wait for her return. My mind slid through every scenario, from innocent to tragic, and each new possibility only heightened my dread. In a desperate attempt to calm my racing thoughts, I busied myself around the house. I scrubbed the sink until it gleamed, rearranged books on the shelf, even flipped through the TV channels mindlessly. But nothing distracted me for more than a minute at a time. My gaze kept drifting to the clock. Eventually, I perched at the dining table, phone in hand, considering calling her. What would I say? "Hey, honey, just checking in. By the way, a fancy restaurant called about your romantic dinner reservations. Care to explain?" That sounded accusatory, unhinged. If she was planning a sweet surprise, I'd spoil it with one blunt question. But if she wasn't? No, I told myself. Don't call. Just wait. She'll come home. And then you'll ask. Time inched forward like a stubborn snail crossing pavement. I glanced at the clock again, 2 p.m. She'd left at 9 o'clock. A swirl of anxiety tore at me. Usually, I prided myself on trusting her and respecting her autonomy. Why was I unraveling over this? The answer was obvious: secrets. If I'd learned anything in our marriage, it was that secrets corrode trust faster than anything else. Finally, around 3:30, I heard keys jangle in the front door. My heart lurched. I forced myself to stand, wiping sweaty palms on my jeans. The door swung open, revealing Emilia, her cheeks flushed from the cold outside. She carried a single grocery bag and wore an exhausted expression. "Hey," she greeted me softly, shutting the door behind her. "Sorry I'm so late. Traffic was terrible." I nodded, forcing a casual tone. "Everything okay?" Her eyes flicked away for a second before returning to mine. "Yeah, just errands." "Why?" She set the grocery bag on the kitchen counter. I followed, each step feeling weighted. My pulse roared in my ears, but I tried to maintain composure. "A restaurant called earlier," I began carefully. "They said they wanted to confirm your reservation for tonight. Candlelit dinner for two at 7. She froze, fingers curling around the edge of the counter. Silence yawned between us. Her gaze skittered to the floor, then back up. They called here? That must have been a mistake. A mistake. My voice quivered with tension. They specifically asked for you and said it was a dinner for two at La Reverie. That's a pretty specific mistake. Emilia swallowed, her throat bobbing. I can explain, she said, though her tone was uncertain. My chest tightened. Please do. She turned away, running a hand through her hair. I'm sorry. I didn't mean for you to find out like this. So what is it? I asked, stepping closer. Were you planning something for us, or? She inhaled shakily and faced me, eyes tinged with guilt. It's not for us, she admitted, voice small. I wasn't planning to go with you. I felt the blood drain from my face. Then who? My voice emerged hoarse, bracing for a name that might confirm my darkest fears. Her lips parted, hesitation evident. A colleague, she said at last, glancing aside. From the new branch downtown. We've been working together on a project, and we wanted to discuss some details in a quiet setting. My mind whirled. A candlelit dinner to discuss work details? At the most romantic restaurant in town? That doesn't make sense. She flinched at the bluntness in my tone. It's complicated, she whispered. We've grown close, and I wanted a place where we wouldn't be interrupted. The reservation was a last-minute idea, but I'm sorry, okay? I stared at her, a maelstrom of pain, anger, and disbelief spiraling inside me. All the times we'd gone on dates, we'd never even considered La Reverie because it was too expensive, too fancy. Now she was using it for some hush-hush dinner with a coworker? My voice trembled. If you wanted to discuss something privately, we have a perfectly fine home. Or you could pick a quiet coffee shop. But you specifically booked a candlelit dinner, just the two of you? How is that not crossing a line? Her eyes glistened with what looked like shame. It's not what you think. I swear, we've been talking about forging a strong partnership for this project, and a formal dinner seemed appropriate. Even as she spoke, her voice shook, betraying uncertainty in her own excuse. A stinging sensation flared in my chest, as though I'd been punched. Appropriate? It feels like you're hiding something else. She lowered her gaze. I'm sorry, she said again, her voice near a whisper. I'm not proud of the secrecy. I just didn't think you'd understand. Help me understand, then, I implored, stepping closer. Are you having an affair? Is that what this is about? Her eyes widened, horror flashing across her features. No, I swear it's nothing like that. She reached for my hand, but I drew back, uncertain and hurt. I'm not cheating. This is purely professional. Maybe it looks bad, but that's not how I intended it. I swallowed thickly. Professional dinners don't generally involve romantic atmospheres. You know how it looks. She sighed, pressing her palm to her forehead as though combating a headache. Look, the colleague, his name is Mark. We've been under a lot of pressure from the higher-ups. We need to pitch a major client soon, and Mark insisted on a setting away from prying eyes, where we could strategize thoroughly. He recommended La Reverie. Said it'd be quiet on a Tuesday night. My mind reeled with conflicting thoughts. On one hand, her explanation was so tenuous. On the other, I saw genuine discomfort etched in her face. She didn't look triumphant or defiant, she looked cornered, upset. Could it be that she was naive enough to think booking a candlelit dinner was harmless? Or was she covering up something deeper? Emilia, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady, why hide it from me completely? Even if it was professional, you should have mentioned it. This morning you said you were just running errands. She paused, chewing her lip. Because I knew how it would look. I knew you'd get upset. Honestly, I felt uneasy about it, too, but Mark made it sound so urgent. He wanted to finalize things before tomorrow's meeting, so we needed an evening slot. If I told you, I was afraid you'd be jealous or worried. So I lied. And now I've made it worse. A swirl of conflicting emotions churned inside me, anger, betrayal, but also empathy. Emilia was a high performer at her firm, always pushing to excel. Maybe she'd let that ambition cloud her judgment. But was there more? I tried to calm my breathing. All right, I said at length. Let's say I believe you about it being strictly professional. Why not choose a regular restaurant or even your office after hours? You realize candlelit dinner has a very specific connotation. She nodded, voice trembling. I do. And I realize now how stupid it sounds. Mark picked it. I went along with it. that's all. The mention of this Mark set my teeth on edge. Well, I don't like it, I said bluntly, my heart pounding. I don't like the idea of you having a romantic dinner with some coworker, sorry, business dinner. Especially if you're not upfront about it. Amelia swallowed, tears beginning to gather in her eyes. I'm sorry, she whispered. I messed up. If it means that much to you, I'll cancel. I just don't want to jeopardize the project. I exhaled, brushing a hand through my hair. If you're telling me the truth, then you should call him right now and pick a different venue. Or handle it at your office. Or do it over a Zoom call, for God's sake. Anything but a secret rendezvous at La Reverie. This is not okay. She reached into her pocket, pulling out her phone. All right, she said, tears slipping down her cheeks. I'll message him that the plan's off. Let me just. She trailed off, tapping at her screen. I studied her face, searching for signs of hesitation. She typed rapidly, then stared at the phone, waiting. My mind buzzed with uneasy relief. If she was willing to cancel, maybe it was truly innocent, just a misstep fueled by workplace pressure. But part of me remained skeptical. Sometimes, backpedaling is a tactic to keep deeper truths hidden. A minute later, her phone buzzed. She read the reply, biting her lip. He's not thrilled, she murmured, eyes flicking up to me. Says we need to finalize details tonight, or the client meeting tomorrow could be compromised. I folded my arms. Then propose a coffee shop or your office. I'm not comfortable with you going to that restaurant under a romantic pretense, especially when you lied to me about it. She nodded, tears still glimmering. Okay, I understand. Her fingers danced over the phone again. I'll tell him we'll meet at the office. That's open 24/7 for employees with key cards anyway. Silence settled as she typed another message. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. I tried to quell the swirl of emotions inside. My love for her, my protectiveness, my anger at the secrecy. The overhead light cast harsh shadows, making everything feel more dramatic. She set down her phone with a trembling sigh. I'm so sorry, she repeated, voice barely above a whisper. I never wanted to hurt you. I got caught up in how urgent everything felt. I nodded stiffly. We'll see how this goes. Right now, I'm still struggling with the fact that you hid it from me in the first place. She stepped closer, tentatively resting a hand on my arm. I love you, she said, eyes brimming. This was never about betraying you. I swear. A pang of sorrow tugged at my chest. I wanted to believe her. Then let's try to move past it, I said, my voice softening. No more secrets, okay? She nodded, tears rolling down her cheeks. No more secrets. We stood there for a moment, a fragile hush enveloping us. I tried to interpret the sincerity in her eyes. My gut told me that she was telling me the partial truth, at least. But whether she harbored any unspoken feelings for Mark, or whether there had been a more complicated dynamic, remained uncertain. For now, though, she had cancelled the reservation, and that had to be enough. The next day, our routine was strained. We moved around each other in the kitchen like uncertain ghosts. At breakfast, I asked if she was still meeting Mark in the office that night. She nodded. Yes, we agreed on 7 p.m. We'll order takeout if we're hungry, just so we can finalize the pitch. I tried not to let my tension show. Okay, I replied. Thanks. She gave me a fleeting smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. I'll be home after we wrap up. Probably 9 or 10. I forced a nod. All right. Good luck. With that, she left for work. I was left to wrestle with swirling doubts. Was she telling the truth now, or was the dinner simply relocated? She'd promised no more secrets, but my trust was shaken. Hoping for clarity, I decided to do something I rarely did. Show up at her office unannounced, around the time she said she'd be there with Mark. If everything was on the level, I'd find them working in a conference room, discussing slides and data. If it wasn't, maybe I'd discover something else. The day crept by. I tried focusing on my job, but my concentration was non-existent. By 6:30 p.m., I was pacing the living room, checking the time repeatedly. Finally, I grabbed my keys, hopped into my car, and drove toward her firm. The roads were slick with recent rainfall, reflecting neon lights from shops. My heart thrummed with adrenaline and dread. When I reached the office building, a tall, sleek structure downtown, I parked discreetly in a side lot. The front doors were still open, but after hours, you needed a keycard to access the main floors. I walked into the lobby, my stomach churning. The security guard, a bored-looking man, glanced up. I approached, trying to appear calm. "Hi," I said, "I'm here to see my wife, Emilia. She's working late. Is that allowed?" He shrugged. "Name?" I gave him our details. He typed something into the computer, frowned, and then said, "She's on the 18th floor, I guess. You'll need a visitor's badge. Sign in here." I signed the log, pinned the badge to my jacket, and he swiped his card at the elevator panel to grant me access to the 18th floor. "Elevators are to your left," he said. "Thanks," I murmured, heading that way. Inside the elevator, my heart pounded like a drum. This felt invasive, but I couldn't quell the storm of suspicion. If everything was as she said, I'd walk in on a normal work session. If not, I tried not to dwell on that. The doors slid open with a gentle chime. The corridor was quiet, overhead fluorescent lights humming softly. I stepped out, scanning the glass-walled offices and conference rooms. Most desks were empty, apparently, few employees stayed late. My footsteps echoed in the hush. I spotted a lit conference room at the far end of the corridor, blinds half drawn. Approaching, I heard low voices, one male, one female, mingled with the rustle of papers. I peered through the glass. Emilia and a man, presumably Mark, sat at a long table, laptops open, documents spread out. They were talking in hushed tones. The scene looked perfectly normal. No candlelight, no intimate closeness. Just two co-workers collaborating. Relief and guilt rushed through me. Maybe I'd overreacted. Summoning courage, I rapped softly on the glass door. Inside, they both jerked upright, startled. Emilia's eyes widened as she recognized me. Her expression flickered through surprise, concern, and then something like annoyance. Mark just frowned, probably wondering who I was. Emilia stood, stepping to the door. "What are you doing here?" she whispered, glancing over her shoulder at Mark. I tried a disarming smile, though my nerves were still on edge. "I wanted to see if you needed anything. Maybe bring you coffee or dinner. You said you'd be working late, so I thought I'd stop by." She folded her arms. "That's sweet, but we're kind of in the middle of something. I told you I'd be home around 9 or 10. I nodded. "I won't stay long. I just wanted to check if everything is okay." She sighed, glancing back at Mark, who was now collecting some papers. He approached, offering his hand. "You must be her husband," he said politely. "I'm Mark." I shook his hand, observing him, tall, neatly dressed, a professional demeanor. "Yes," I confirmed, voice tight. "I am." He offered a thin smile. "Emilia said you might be worried about the big meeting tomorrow. Everything's under control here. She's been doing amazing work." I nodded curtly, not sure how to respond. "Good. Just wanted to be sure." An awkward silence followed. Emilia cleared her throat. "Well, we're almost done reviewing these numbers. Maybe we'll grab dinner on the way out, there's a sandwich shop down the street." Mark nodded in agreement, adding, "We should finalize the slides by 8:30. I felt more at ease. No sign of wrongdoing, no clandestine romance. Just two co-workers, albeit in a scenario that had almost spiraled out of control thanks to that suspicious reservation. "Okay. I'll let you get back to it, then," I said, stepping back. Emilia followed me into the hallway, shutting the conference room door behind her. She looked torn between irritation and relief. "Why did you really come here?" she asked, voice low. I shrugged, shame coloring my cheeks. "I wanted to see if you were actually working or if—" My words trailed off. She pinched the bridge of her nose. "Look, I get it. I messed up with that dinner plan, but I cancelled it, remember? You don't have to spy on me." I swallowed. "I know. I'm sorry if it feels like spying. I just needed reassurance." She sighed, shoulders sagging. "Let's just get through tonight, okay? Then tomorrow, after the pitch, we can talk more. Right now, I need to focus." I forced a nod. "All right. I'll go. Sorry for intruding." She gave me a weary look, then turned back to the conference room. I watched her rejoin Mark, leaning over the table to point at a spreadsheet. Heart heavy, I headed back to the elevator, my footsteps echoing down the silent corridor. Relief mingled with a bitter sense of disquiet. She'd told me the truth this time, yet the memory of her initial secrecy and the candlelit reservation still stung. That night, Emilia came home around 9:30 as promised. I tried to mask my lingering tension, greeting her with a tentative smile. She set her bag down, exhaling heavily. "How did it go?" I asked, glancing up from the couch. She shrugged, dropping onto the cushion beside me. Good. We tightened up the pitch. Tomorrow's going to be hectic, but I feel prepared. I offered what I hoped was a supportive nod. I'm glad. A strained quiet settled. Our living room felt too big, too still. After a moment, she looped her arm around mine and rested her head on my shoulder. I'm sorry about all this, she murmured. I hate the distance that's grown between us. I brushed my fingers along her hair, a familiar gesture that once felt so comforting. Me too, I said softly. Let's talk. I don't want this tension between us. She nodded, voice barely above a whisper. Me neither. With the overhead lamp casting soft light, we began an honest conversation. She explained how the pressure at her job had skyrocketed, how Mark was the new star employee eager to prove himself. He'd suggested the candlelit dinner primarily because he claimed it was the one place he could think clearly, away from the hustle of typical bars or casual cafes. She admitted feeling uneasy about it but also excited by the chance to nail their pitch. Fearful of my jealousy, she'd concealed the plan. The phone call from the restaurant had wrecked that plan, obviously. I confessed my own insecurities, how I'd jumped to the worst conclusion. We talked about trust, about how secrets, no matter how small, fester and create doubt. She promised to be more upfront if something like this arose again. I apologized for showing up at her office unannounced, though I still felt justified in wanting to be sure. By the end of our conversation, tears clung to her lashes, but her posture seemed more relaxed than it had in days. I love you, she said, turning her face up to mine. I'm sorry if I made you feel second best. I swallowed the lump in my throat. I love you too. I just don't want to lose what we have. She nodded, leaning in. I wrapped my arms around her, feeling her breath hitch as we shared a tentative kiss. It was a fragile moment, a vow to rebuild the bridge we nearly tore apart with secrecy and suspicion. The following day, Emilia woke early, anxious for the big pitch. I rose with her, offering coffee and a supportive hug before she left, dressed sharply in her best business attire. As the hours ticked by, I found myself rooting for her success, hoping she'd land a client and reaffirm her place at the firm. Regardless of the swirling doubts about Mark, I wanted my wife to shine in her career. Around noon, she called, breathless with excitement. They'd nailed the presentation, the client was impressed. She and Mark had handled the Q&A flawlessly. I heard pride in her voice. We made plans to celebrate that evening, just the two of us, at a local bistro we loved. Something simple, honest, no illusions or hidden agendas. I arrived at the restaurant first, picking a cozy booth near the window. A hush of early dinner traffic filled the space, clinking silverware, murmured conversations. My heart fluttered with anticipation, eager to reconnect with Emilia under normal, loving circumstances. Moments later, she stepped inside, scanning for me. When our gazes locked, I saw relief and warmth in her expression. Hey, she greeted, sliding in across from me. She wore a contented smile. What a day. I'm exhausted but thrilled. I reached across the table, lacing my fingers through hers. I'm so proud of you, I said softly. You did it. She squeezed my hand, eyes shining. We did it. Thank you for understanding everything. The server came by, took our orders, and left us with water glasses. Emilia launched into a recap of the pitch, describing how Mark fielded some tough questions and how she showcased their design prototypes. I listened attentively, genuinely happy for her. For the first time in days, there was no tension in her voice, no unspoken weight dragging us down. Halfway through dinner, though, I noticed a flicker of hesitation in her eyes. She was swirling her fork through her pasta, lips pursed. I leaned forward. Something on your mind? She set down her fork, letting out a sigh. I realized something today. After the pitch, Mark pulled me aside and apologized. He said he felt guilty about pushing for that fancy dinner idea, that he never intended to cause friction in my marriage. My heart gave a slight twinge at the mention of Mark, but I forced myself to remain open. Oh? She nodded. He admitted he sometimes conflates work dinners with a more personal vibe. He said it's a bad habit from his old job, where co-workers regularly wined and dined clients in romantic spots. He apologized for not seeing how that might cause confusion or suspicion. I exhaled slowly. Well, it's good he recognized that. Did it help you feel any better about him? She offered a small shrug. Yes and no. I appreciate the apology, but it confirmed that I'm not crazy to have felt weird about it. He sometimes oversteps boundaries, even if unintentionally. I studied her face. So do you trust him going forward? She took a moment, then nodded slowly. I think so. He's talented, and we work well together. But I'll be more assertive next time if he suggests something that feels inappropriate. A faint smile curved her lips. I learned that from this fiasco. Relief washed over me. We were talking it through, openly and honestly, like we used to. The server arrived, asking if we wanted dessert. We agreed to share a slice of tiramisu, our longtime favorite. A comfortable warmth settled in, and I watched her expression soften. As we savored spoonfuls of sweet cream and espresso-soaked cake, she reached for my hand again. Thank you for giving me another chance, she said quietly. I know how suspicious that phone call must have made everything seem. I squeezed her fingers gently. I'll admit, I was a mess for a bit, I said, voice quivering. But I'm glad we confronted it instead of letting it fester. She nodded, eyes glistening with gratitude. We'll keep talking, keep being honest. That's how we move forward, right? I couldn't help a small grin. Absolutely. No more running errands that turn out to be secret dinners. She blushed, but the hint of humor in her smile suggested we were finally stepping out of the shadows. For the first time since the fiasco began, I felt a genuine sense of lightness return. Emilia and I were still us, imperfect, yes, but bound by love and a willingness to learn from our mistakes. In the days that followed, the tension between us further dissolved. Emilia often recounted how the project progressed with Mark, always specifying if they planned any working lunches or post-office brainstorming sessions. The transparency, though occasionally awkward to hear, "Oh, Mark wants to stay late. Is that okay with you?" was far better than secrecy. We established a new understanding. No matter how minor an event might seem, we'd share details if it could affect our relationship. Little by little, the memory of that candlelit dinner reservation faded from a raw wound to a cautionary tale. We recognized how easily trust can be shaken when communication breaks down. I also learned not to leap to worst-case scenarios at the first sign of trouble, though I still believed her initial actions had crossed a line. Trust, once cracked, can be mended, but the scar remains. Every now and then, the phone would ring and I'd feel a brief flicker of anxiety, recalling that fateful day. But then I'd remind myself that we'd grown stronger, forging a deeper bond through honesty. One evening, Emilia surprised me by suggesting we go to La Reverie ourselves. Why not reclaim it? She said with a tentative grin. Make it our place, not some shadowy memory. I hesitated, memories of that dreaded phone call flaring. Are you sure? I asked quietly. That might be intense. She slid her hand into mine, gaze steady. Yes, but in a good way. We've come a long way. I want us to enjoy what we were denied before. Her words warmed me. So, the following weekend, we dressed up, she in a flowing burgundy dress, me in a suit jacket, and drove to the restaurant that had nearly torn us apart. The host greeted us politely, leading us to a dimly lit table for two, complete with soft candlelight and elegant place settings. I felt a flutter of nerves, but Emilia's gentle smile across from me grounded me in the present. As we browsed the menu, I teased, should we order something extra fancy, since we're here? She laughed softly. Sure, we deserve it after all the stress. Let's make this a real celebration. We clinked glasses of sparkling wine, the candles flamed dancing between us. In that glow, her features seemed more vibrant than ever, her eyes brimming with sincerity. I'm grateful for you, she murmured, resting her hand atop mine. For your patience, your willingness to hear me out. I swallowed the emotion rising in my throat. I'm grateful for you, too. For coming clean, for working with me to fix this. She leaned in, the candlelight revealing the softness in her gaze. I hope this is the start of a new chapter. A hush fell between us, not out of discomfort, but out of reverence for what we'd survived. Then the waiter arrived with our dishes, perfectly plated salmon for her, a tender filet mignon for me. The aroma enticed us, and we exchanged smiles, ready to indulge in something that felt earned. Over dinner, we reminisced about our first date, how she'd spilled coffee on my jacket, how we'd laughed about it all evening. We talked about future vacations, about maybe revisiting the cabin we'd rented years ago. The conversation flowed with an easiness that had been missing for weeks, maybe even months. The meal wound down with dessert, a decadent chocolate soufflé that we shared. Each bite tasted like redemption, sweet and comforting. When the check arrived, I paid, and Emilia teased, next time, it's on me. We left the restaurant hand in hand, stepping into the mild evening air. I paused outside, exhaling deeply, letting the moment sink in. She looked up at me, eyes shining. "We did it," she said softly. "Faced the place that almost broke us. And now it's ours." I wrapped my arms around her, pulling her close. "You're mine, I'm yours," I murmured. "No more shadows." Her smile was radiant, a promise of tomorrow's hope. "Let's go home," she whispered. In the following months, Mark's project concluded successfully, netting the company a major client. Emilia was commended for her dedication and teamwork. She continued to mention Mark in passing, but always with transparency. The swirl of secrecy that once threatened our marriage was replaced by a mutual vow to keep the lines of communication wide open. For my part, I learned the importance of addressing doubts head-on. No more stewing in silence or waiting for an explosion. Emilia learned that well-intentioned secrecy can be as damaging as outright deception, especially in a relationship built on trust. We grew together, forging a deeper resilience that replaced the naive assumption that love alone was enough to ward off misunderstandings. Some nights, I still thought back to the phone call that started it all, the trembling voice from the restaurant confirming that candlelit dinner. I remembered the pit in my stomach, the fear that everything I cherished was unraveling. But then I'd glance over at Emilia, see her curled beside me on the couch, and realize that crisis also brought us closer in the end. We'd faced the possibility of betrayal and found our way through. Strangely, I felt grateful for that test of our bond. One evening, months after the incident, we hosted a small gathering at our home for friends and co-workers, including Mark. I was nervous, but I recognized it as another step in normalizing everything. Mark turned out to be friendly, albeit somewhat reserved, clearly passionate about his job. Emilia and I exchanged a look, an unspoken understanding that once upon a time, this man's suggestion of a candlelit dinner nearly tore us apart. But now, he was just a colleague, and we were secure in our relationship. Later that night, when the guests had gone and the house was quiet, Emilia and I sank onto the sofa, leaning against one another. "Well, that was something," I said, half laughing. "I survived meeting Mark in a relaxed setting." She smirked. "He's not so bad, right?" I shrugged playfully. "He's fine. I'm just glad you're home with me now, not off at some suspicious restaurant." We shared a grin, comfortable in the teasing. She nudged my shoulder gently. "Never again," she promised, pressing a kiss to my cheek. "You're the only dinner partner I want." Warmth filled my chest. "Good," I replied, hugging her close. "Because I'm not letting you go." We stayed that way for a while, the echoes of chatter still lingering in the air, the smell of leftover snacks drifting from the kitchen. A sense of peace washed over us. The memory of heartbreak and doubt was still part of our story, but it was no longer the defining chapter. Instead, it stood as a reminder of how fragile trust can be, and how strong we can become once we decide to rebuild it, brick by honest brick. In that cozy moment, I felt more certain than ever that no matter what storms lay ahead, we'd face them together. After all, we'd already proven that even a single phone call could upend everything we knew, yet also grant us a chance to reinforce the foundations of our love. There would be no more illusions, no more hidden reservations. From that day forward, candlelit dinners would belong to us and us alone, fueling the quiet, steadfast flame of our marriage.